So you just you and me.
Might be, it'll be very fascinating.
Martin,
Hey, John, how are you?
good yourself?
Good. So you've been getting some sun, no?
Yeah.
Mowing the lawn or doing something fun?
Oh, I was sitting and watching my son play baseball.
Oh.
I just pat and that's it.
Oh, well, let's see.
Here she comes.
So did you hear from Kobe today?
Mm-hmm. No, I have not.
And when he's coming back, and parents going.
Hello. Your mask.
My clock is not as fast as this
These
one.
clocks, I know.
All right, but
They're
I
all
brought
different.
popsicles, so everybody has to eat.
Oh.
Otherwise they're gonna be melted.
That's awful.
Well, I just been standing outside all day watering, so.
Oh,
I have fudgesicles and firecracker popsicles.
oh my goodness.
Well, they're on sale today at Soup, where I stopped to get a bite of supper. So,
That's very thoughtful.
oops. Fudgesicles and. Have two, they're little.
I'm gonna take one of these guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
You guys can go upstairs if you want to put them in the freezer.
Okay,
Want me to
let's
sit
just
in here for you?
get everybody going.
Sure.
Martin, how about you? Okay. Mike, how about you? No, you good? Okay.
Can I hold back for you?
Let me have one of each and then.
Because not more, I got more, I'll come in the freezer for you.
Here, I'll take that one.
Okay.
Thank you,
Okay,
Dad.
sure.
Just inside this thing as I wore it all day, so I could use something cold. But that beats sitting at the computer all day, so.
So, Chrissy and Audrey both?
Audrey was not going to be here, but Chrissy said she was going to.
Okay, so we should have water, so I'll make sure I had the count. Okay.
Oh, I'll put these ones out of this bag I got at home. That would be a good idea.
Makes the meeting more fun, having popsicles.
Well, at least it's not warm root beer this time.
Hi.
Chrissy, we're having popsicles.
Bless you.
So I like this actuals thing. Seems like useful, nice and useful information.
That's a nice layout.
And Mrs. Morgan's able to work with Black Mountain to get that line up and work. So, where to begin?
Well, where we left off was, basically, we needed to know what we had, if we had money for another fifth grade teacher. And then we were talking about whether we could try for an SRO or whether we should put money back into supplies. Isn't that kind of where we were? It's amazing, I remember that.
Good for you.
Can I ask one question about the report? The actuals for 12-13, is that the total expense for this last fiscal?
Yes, it's not final because we're still closing year end, but that's all the expense at this point in time. There might be some reclassifications, journal vouchers, but at this point, all the payables are in and that sort of thing.
Should be pretty complete.
Yeah, just might be some reclassifications, possible few adjustments, but yeah.
So when you build the budget for this coming year, do you work from the budget from last year, or you must rather than the actual expenses from last year?
Well, we work off of the prior year budget numbers, take a look at where they're at and try to keep them as consistent as possible. So we use historical averages to build the framework of our planning budget.
And look at some of these where the actual was quite a bit off of the budgeted numbers, and we kind of wonder if maybe using the last year's budget numbers are a good starting point. But I guess you know the reason for the deviation, right?
Correct. So, is there an area you wanted to ask a specific question about?
Well, I guess along those lines of looking at the supplies, you know, we were talking last time about reducing the supply budget to pay for some of this other stuff, and
What page are you on, Martin?
I guess we are on page number 2 of 13.
Okay, thanks.
So like line 612, elementary supplies, the budget was 46,000, the actual is 68,000. And we're talking about reducing the budget by 10,000 this year to pay for some medicine. That seems like a wide variance there.
Yeah, and what it is just so that you understand, when we talk about the entirety of that, those line items, we look like under instruction, which is the 1,000, 112, 1,000, 115, all the way down through that line item. That area of the budget, we try to make sure balances out at the end, because these are estimations of what we expect to spend, but we try to contain ourselves within spending limits of. But when you see an area that perhaps we overexpend, for example, I'll give you an example here. Under that instructional area, we would say, okay, we have substitute teachers. We plan that, okay, we're going to budget about 59,000. If we spend less than that, we have monies left over, but we spent the supply. We may take the monies from that savings that we had in that one area, and we would pay for more supplies, and we would code it to high school, middle school, elementary. And so at the end of the year, those items look overexpended, but the entirety of that section of the budget maintains its integrity, is what we try to do.
So like in this case, then we actually did spend 68,000 for supplies. So is that the kind of thing that would carry over to this current year, then, the supplies that would be used in the current year, or it's just stuff that's disposable?
We take a look at it as the year begins to spend down, supply-wise. We try to control our spending, make sure that everything is, things that are absolutely necessary and needed are getting purchased. But those items that are useful and could be helpful, if If they're not absolutely necessary, we try not to purchase them. But then as we get down towards the end of the year, if we see that that section of the budget is maintaining its integrity and is not out of balance and into deficits, then we'll say, okay, at the end of the year, we'll begin spending more money in the supply line items in order to get that material that we know can be very helpful.
So I guess my conclusion would be then reducing that line item for supplies by 10,000 for this year may not be as critical as it would seem, since you have maybe some supplies carried over from the prior year.
Yeah, and see, and that's one of the things in here that is difficult to discern when you take a look at this current year budget. The planning budget, we bumped up the monies. If you look in the planning budget that I gave you, you would see that in that line item, we'd already cut it back by upwards of $10,000 back to a previous year where we had budgeted at closer to, let me see.
I guess it was 34,000
Mhm.
the year before.
Yeah, so you'll see that we pulled it back to those areas of spending. So there have been some adjustments that have been made in the planning budget side. Making a mess.
Sorry, I didn't bring napkins.
Want to grab some?
Paper towels, I need some paper towels.
So that's one thing that we've done now. As we look through this, one of the things that we've been looking at is, okay, where have our actuals actually shown that we may have a little too much budgeted in there? And where can we actually make some cuts in the budget and be more in line with what our actual expenditures are? And so that's one of the things that we've been looking at throughout here. And so, for example, if you go down to 170 vacation payout, if you're at line item 170, you will see that we budgeted 20,000, we spent 10. Now, if you go on your planning budget and you go to line items 170,
Actually, we didn't spend any.
Right.
So you're going to reduce it to 10, I think is what your
Yeah.
plan is.
you'll see that these are monies that we budget for, which I call our unfunded liabilities that exist out there. We have the liability of our teachers who could retire and ask for a payout of their vacation leave and a payout. So we have the classified employees and the teachers who could ask for some payout of their vacation leaves. Now, on the teacher side, it is if they accumulate too many days beyond 100, they can get a payout. For the classified, if they decide they're done and they're retiring, they can get their payout. So this would be where we go in and we pull from. This is basically budgeted at about 20% of the exposure that we have. So we carry much greater exposure of the number of days of vacation than all of our classified employees, but we would never expect all of our employees to leave at any one time for that full liability to ever hit us. And that's the same as when we do substitute teaching. We don't budget 100% of all the substitute liability that we have existing out there. We go off of a historical average of perspective to say, okay, we've typically been seeing about $60,000 a year in substitute wages that we've had to pay out. So we budget in that historical average, even though it's well above $100,000 of liability that exists. And historically, we've been hitting right around 60,000. Not everybody takes all of their sick leave. They can bank it, they can do different things with it. But in the case that they did, we feel like our historical average provides not. Now, in this case, because we don't spend, we didn't have this expenditure here. In this section of the budget, we have more money. So as we get down towards the end of the year, we go to those useful, helpful items that could be, helping the school quite a bit, whether it be textbooks and whatnot, and we make those types of purchases. We add that money into those areas and begin those types of purchases. Does that explain a little bit of how
Yes.
we try to?
So within that category, you can use that money somewhat interchangeably in that category.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah.
Absolutely. It's not set in stone that because you're in line item 720, that you have to spend your money in line item 720. You have the idea of each of those line items is an estimation. You're creating the estimation of what you feel your exposure for expenditures are going to be. And so you use those historical numbers and you use your actual numbers and you work the two together to try to give as much perspective as possible to what you believe your spending is going to be. And then you try to live within that. I mean, as we start off the school year, right out of the gate right now, we're buying supplies for next year. So we'll see our supply line items take a nosedive right at the beginning of the year. Then all of a sudden it'll stay way off. And there'll be incremental spending off. And then if it looks like, for example, if it looks like we're getting into an issue that, let's use the example of substitute teachers. For the first half of the year, I see a large number. I've already spent $50,000 for a half a year of substitute wages. And I'm saying, okay, I got a half a year left, and spring is always harder than the fall. I could be saying, I'm going to be way overspending that.
Mm-hmm.
Then one of the things that we do is we implement lockdowns. We'll lock the budget down, and I'll tell the administrators, your supply line items are locked, because I see a potential risk of us not having enough money to pay all of our bills.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, if teachers are taking a lot of sick leave, we have the need for substitute teachers and to pay those substitute teachers, that becomes a priority. And so those are things that we will do during the year. And in the past, there's been like this March 1st deadline. Make sure you've got your supplies for the year lined up by March 1st, because there's not going to be any more spending after that time. We haven't had to strictly adhere to that because we've been doing a pretty good job up front of managing our resources.
Mm-hmm.
So. Any questions? Does that seem to explain?
Mhm.
We've been looking at that workman's comp rate. I talked to Jeannie a little bit about, like, in this budget here, we see that, we spent down on line item 1,250 workman's comp, and we have some money sitting there that we haven't spent. And that's a computed number within the program itself. We get these rates from our workman's comp carrier. We plug them into the computer program and they run the calculation off on it. And that was one of the questions that I had asked Jeannie a little bit about is, okay, what is it that we're seeing? What experience do we see there that could cause that calculation to be off? So, we've been looking at that, trying to determine and decipher it a little better. And we just got new numbers a couple of days ago.
It's been a little while, but I gave you a copy, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're plugging those in to see whether or not
In the
that's
year.
going to have a change.
And unemployment too is another one that you get typically every year. they may or may not change, but you do get updates once a year.
And then like on health insurance, we had quite a bit of money left over in health insurance. Well, now health insurance is difficult because we turn around and we have an open enrollment period. We fund for all the employees to possibly take the health insurance, then not all the employees take the health insurance. And so, although we have funded for that, because they didn't take that, that leaves us with some monies off to the side now. We could decide to say, okay, we're seeing a percentage each year of employees that aren't taking health insurance, and we can decide, okay, let's pull that back by, 10%. Haven't done that in the past because I feel like the minute we start doing that, I'm gonna have the employees taking our health insurance, and especially with the Affordable Care Act now in place, it has created a lot of movement on our employees.
Well, in this last few years, when families' job situations have been changing, maybe the husband had the insurance and the wife didn't take it here, but maybe he doesn't have his job anymore now, that's a qualifying event for her to sign up.
Right.
So it's been kind of dicey here with so much change in the...
See, and that's the other thing, is you're absolutely right. Qualifying events mid-year, if you don't have the money set aside for that, and a person says, my spouse lost their job, I need to get our health insurance, we had it under his plan, he lost his job. We've got to get the money in the budget to deal with that. So we kind of have always funded that at 100%, knowing that at some point there could be some of that money that at the end of the year we may have left over that we could then use. And this is the other thing that we have done, and I believe that it's been a very effective tool for the school district to utilize. We have had end-of-the-year monies. We've always planned that if we could be about 3% of our budget, within 3% of our budget, completely, totally locked down and accounted for. That leaves us with monies at the end of a year that then the Board of Trustees can use for projects they deem necessary for completion. For example, you take the roof on the lower elementary down here. It was leaking like a sieve. Had been doing that for a couple of years now. The board this summer, in June, said, okay, we have some end-of-the-year monies. Instead of imposing a tax on the taxpayers to fund that, let's use our end-of-the-year monies and take care of that issue. And so there's been quite a few projects that have been done by the board as they have been very responsible in trying to take care of the upkeep of the facility. And I have to say, I have seen some very impressive projects along the way in terms of things that we've been able to accomplish in trying to take care of the public's trust of this big facility, making sure that it is in good shape and that it's able to survive for years to come. So
this year's end-of-the-year money goes to the roof and the gutters on the old gym and a few other small things, and that was it.
Year previous, we had the storage units.
Yep, we did storage units year previous, and the year before that, I think we did the handicap ramp. So.
Well, the handicap ramp had some.
And it had some additional funding. Yeah, didn't we have some grant money or some matching money there? And then, now, on the other hand, the septic system project, that's going to come out of reserves and some tax, late collected tax money, right? Isn't that what it is? Contested collections on tax money or something that were for the building bond levy that we paid off in 2010, right? 2010. So there's still a little bit of tax money trickling into that, so we're putting that towards the sewer project as well as using money out of our reserves.
And that was another thing that the board has done for the past several years, has been these end-of-the-year monies don't always have to be spent on projects. They can be moved into what is called a reserve fund. And once they go into this reserve fund, that money can't be touched. The only way that money can be touched is if there's an event. Now, for this year, we've been putting about 50,000 a year for the last 8 years into this reserve fund. And we're reaching the point where we're almost at our cap, the maximum amount the state would allow us to have in that reserve. Well, this year we had a qualifying event. Our septic drain field was deemed on the fritz, it was going out. There was gray water that was percolating to the surface on the playground. And so the board had a choice. What did it need to do? And it decided, okay, we'll take $250,000 out of our reserves, plus
Is it like 80,000 or something from the collected taxes?
the debt service fund, and it would take those monies and it would pay for a major septic renovation for the school and get the septic drain field off of the playground. If we did not have reserve funds, what would have happened was the board would have said, okay, we don't have reserves, we declare an emergency, and then they would have gone in and would have been able to permissibly levy against the taxpayers. You don't want to be in that situation. That, to me, it's better off to be putting monies into a reserve for that event that might occur, so that you have those monies to deal with the issues that you deem are necessary for the operation of the school. And the drain field was one the board deemed was necessary for the operation of the school. So,
And what we're gonna do will be usable if we ever build another building over here. So it'll be usable still. So now we get to start back building up a rainy day fund though.
after this year, after the summer, we'll have to start putting things back in.
So going then on to our 2013-14 budget preliminary proposed here that we were gonna do. So what we were teasing out then is money for that additional fifth grade teacher.
Correct.
And so basically we feel like that we can work that in.
I believe you can work that in, and the reason for that has to do with the way the workman's comp and the health insurance have been treated. I think that we could easily amend some of those numbers in those two areas alone to create the salary for the teaching position. Otherwise, but just so that he knows, what it does do is it goes from that 3% into the years, and it's going to tighten it down to about 2%, which is okay. I mean, really, if we can just tighten it up and have less into the year amounts, that's okay with me. Let's take care of the needs inside the building, which we came to the conclusion, or the board came to the conclusion, that fifth grade situation was necessary. So, just in those two areas.
Yeah, we had to find the money. We have to find the money, yeah. We have to have the money. And then the other money that we knew we had to spend was for this library position that we are not meeting OPI accreditation.
And that was already factored into
The planning budget, yeah, so.
So it was already something that was factored in.
So with saying yes to the additional fifth grade teacher, then we're down to, do we have enough money? And does Ravalli County have a person that would be qualified to take on a part-time / or full-time SRO for us? And
Well, that's a discussion where, once you, we're out on that discussion, this is the board that's going to have to talk about that, is that you can't yo-yo the SRO up and down. Previously, when the SRO program was cut, it was because we got into the budget situation, difficult times, budget-wise, where we made the decision, let's go ahead and cut that position, because we were already ripping teachers and affecting programs. Do we foresee a potential in the future that school funding may be treated in a way that may pose us into a situation where we have to make that consideration? Once again, And I'd say there's a real risk for Class B school districts in Montana to see their funding having problems due to what the legislature has done this last legislative session. They listened very heavily to the Class AA caucuses, and on the funding that they had done this last session, a lot of money in the state, on the state level, has been redirected from Class C and B districts to the Class AA districts. And so, I'm not certain that we're going to see state funding that's going to allow us to sustain that position. What I do say is that if you go with an SRO and you commit to the SRO program, then you are talking about the risks that you pose to the kindergarten position we have and to this 5th grade position that we have. And if you do decide to do the SRO, then you do it knowing that it's going to be a priority over those types of positions, and that there are going to be program changes for instruction that will occur in order to afford that SRO program in the future. Now, can we sustain it within the current budget that we have? Yes, we can, because we factored the SRO into this budget. So it is possible to fund the SRO this next year out of there. But if the money goes tight next year or the year after, I don't think next year. It could be a couple years down the road when it gets tight. What I'm saying is, you can't just not have an SRO.
Well, we can't yank the county around like that as well as, because we would be contributing probably towards that person's salary if they, and the question is also, do they have somebody that would be, that they have trained and ready to go that would be here on campus on August 27th
Not
or
at the
whatever?
beginning of the school year.
Yeah, see?
And it takes time for them to train, so it could be 6 months out. But then again, what I say to that is, that's okay. If we're saying that's our philosophy, we're including it into our plan for the future. And yes, we do have the money this year to do that. And then we can talk about how that handles out.
Well, and you probably don't maybe have quite as much to need for I know that Officer Jividan was instrumental throughout the school, but in terms of calling the cops for your students, probably not as much, but in this last 2 years that we've been without, have we felt like, or have Audrey and Dan felt like it's been an excessive burden to them to not have one?
I wouldn't say an excessive burden. I would say that as it's been reported or relayed to me by them.
It's been noticed. It's an
issue. There is an issue with that. The SRO provides a layer of security to the school.
And the community too, which we've talked about.
The deterrent, one of the biggest things about the SRO is it's a huge deterrent when you can park the sheriff's car out in front of the school. And anybody who might think of trying to mess around with the school, they're going to realize when they walk that door, they might be confronting the sheriff right off the bat. And so it's a huge deterrent factor. But beyond that, I would say there's larger ramifications within the community itself. That with an SRO program, it is a conduit for the Sheriff's Department to understand more of the issues that exist within the student population here and what is taking place within the community. If it wasn't for our SRO, they may have never discovered who spray painted Hideout Mountain. Because that was something that broke loose amongst students in the building and was reported directly to the SRO by students to him.
Well, and that's the other piece too, you were mentioning the community. We haven't had a whole procession of folks in since Sandy Hook who say, gosh, I'm scared for my kid to come to your school. But, this is Montana, and, we're a little bit more isolated and feel like we are, I think, but, if the community was coming to us like the fifth grade parents have been and saying, boy, I really feel that's a priority to have an officer in the building. I don't think we've had that, have we?
We haven't had that, that big of a, we've had interest. We've had some parents come in, not a big shove or push. Now, it gets into another discussion, which I have had with other superintendents in the area. When you think of different counties, whether it be Valley County or Lake County, up around Polson, Lake County took the approach that the people in that community felt that the safety and security of their schools and their communities fell directly to the responsibility of the sheriff's department. So they passed a special safety levy. And that safety levy included funding for a school resource officer in every school in the county.
We had talked about that earlier. Were we able to make any headway with the county on that?
We have not been able to. It was initially discussed, but then they backed away from that. But that gets into the county running that levy and putting the issue before the taxpayers to decide whether or not the taxpayers want to put school resource officers in each building. Now, the problem that they had there was some jurisdictional issues. For example, you have schools that exist within the jurisdiction of the city police force. So who should have the jurisdiction for the school resource officer? Should it be the city force or should it be the county?
That's here in the valley, they were discussing that? Oh, jeez. Okay, so we know how that's gonna turn out.
So, because you have Stevensville with its own sheriff, its own police department here in Hamilton. And so, you've got these kinds of issues.
We don't see any cohesive thing coming out of that.
And so, the reality is I don't see that ever gaining ground or traction unless you get a real activist group of parents up and down the valley who come together and say, we want to force this issue. Because we believe in the low taxes for schools, it should be for the education of our students, not the security of our students. But the security of our students should come in the form of some type of safety levy for school resource officers. And I don't know. Do we have a responsibility for the safety of our students? You betcha. And do you feel like a school resource officer could be helpful to the school district? Yes, it could. It most certainly could. Especially when we've had issues where we've had students who have illicit drugs on them, and it would be very convenient for a school resource officer to be there right at that point and to be dealing directly with those parents and the legal issues that they are going to be dealing with within the court system, because the resource officer would have a better understanding of the school, would have a better understanding of how to be dealing with the student's issues, and a better understanding of the student himself or herself. But in the case that I'm thinking of, you had a deputy come in who has a line understanding of the situation, just sees point A, point B, and very harsh to the parents, And
well, and we've got several kids with legal entanglements, unfortunately. But again, we have to manage the best we can. So, how's it looking for kindergarten? Are we gonna have enough kindergarten teachers? Are we on the edge of?
I'm hoping that the board will make a decision to reallocate the 1-2 combo to kindergarten resources.
Okay. So, is that gonna be
So
tomorrow?
that's not an additional
Or is that in August?
expense, but
it's this tomorrow.
It's tomorrow's meeting, okay, because I read that, but it's been like a week, so. Okay, so we're feeling pretty confident about the incoming enrollment for kindergarten, that we're gonna have to go that direction.
I think it's going, we haven't really, had the kindergarten registration, but even last, or 2 weeks ago, we still had a new kindergartner.
Mhm.
So it seems that,
And what's our numbers there gonna be?
I think right now we're at 55 kindergartners, 56 slash T1, because we still have the kindergarten T1 combo.
Mhm. Okay, was there about 6 or 10 kids in that?
Next year, there's gonna be five.
Okay.
Or only
All right.
3 this year.
Okay.
So as all-day kindergarten, has kicked in, the need for T1 is diminished, which is why we went to the combo.
Mhm.
We still have kids who need that service, and it's nice to have that option.
And
So it's still valuable.
I guess I'm missing a piece of the thread of the deal. Is all-day kindergarten mandatory now, or is it still optional?
It's still optional.
Still optional for parents? Okay.
We did not have any this year opt for all-day, or for half-day, but it's still an option for
Okay,
the
okay.
parents.
So, all right. Well,
It seems like a resource officer, it's important enough that we had to be able to find some money for it in the coming budget years, I would think. I mean, what's like 25,000 or so, doesn't that?
Yeah, it's about 20,000.
Seem like
that would be our contribution to the salary,
Yeah,
right?
because the total funding for that position, I understand it, is about 60,000. So we're giving about a third of it to the county, and they're funding the other 2/3.
I guess the board wants to go that direction, it's from a budget standpoint. Looks to me like we probably have to be able to somehow handle it.
And it is factored into the budget already, we've included it in there, so it is in these numbers. But, like I said, Martin,
It's future years.
you go down this road, you go down this road. I really believe it has to be. We have to be
To
that
commit to it,
disciplined.
because it's not fair to
Because-
yank the county around.
Because as we go down in future years, 2, 3 years down the road, if the state isn't stable in its funding of schools, then it falls back to the local taxpayers. Before we run out and ask for a levy of any sort, we make decisions on programs that we may need to pull back on. And I can say that, we talked about the kindergarten position, we're talking about the fifth grade position, we're talking about, elementary music program, art program, how do we manage these resources and how do we either eliminate them and sustain that resource officer position.
So the conclusion that we need to come to, because I think that we sit here are interested in having a resource officer. I think though that to make that recommendation to the board, then they need to have the discussion that we just had about whether we can sustain it in the long term and whether we're willing to make the commitment to it. Because, again, we're going to make a recommendation to them, what we think, based on the study that we've done here. And then the ultimate decision then comes to the board to say, okay, we want to move forward with that, or maybe we better wait one more year. So, or however much it ends up being.
So, and the other thing about the actual numbers, as you see, if you go back and you look at year to year, end of budget numbers to end of budget numbers, we've been fairly consistent. And there's been it demonstrates consistency with the management of the historical and the planning of the monies. I've talked to Ms. Morgan a little bit about this, and one of the things that we're going to be trying to do more of within the budgeting itself is project recorder codes are an item which we've not done in the past.
But what you're talking about now, the miscellaneous grants, miscellaneous funds, miscellaneous grants, that's the one thing for sure they're doing.
For sure, and then
But we can look into the possibility of some of this other expense accounts you're talking about.
yeah, and we're going to look at these project codes so that we have a better understanding of how those are managed out and how they relate.
Right.
And so we have a consultant coming in from Denning and Downing, our auditing firm, that's going to train Ms. Morgan on the implementation of these codes when they're necessary, when they need to be utilized, so that we can have a better feel for the planning numbers. So we
Just
could
more detail.
possibly have a little bit more detail, a little bit more strength behind those historical numbers.
Because, right.
Decision-making that we need to be making.
Because we don't go into Amy's accounts and print off detailed reports, but with this aspect, if it works, then we can divide it to like a teacher or what have you, and tie those expenses to an individual and see what areas are going well or not so well, that sort of thing. This kind of summarizes, more of a compiling numbers purpose so that things make more sense.
Because as we push these purchase orders, we need a lot of purchase
Yes.
orders. You're talking $5 million of expenses that you push through, with a couple of lines looking at it. And I've always said, it'd be really nice to know which teacher is making the inordinate amount of requests, who's trying to get more access to supply dollars, who's getting very little. And so we've talked about
Yeah.
possibly moving in the future to that scenario, because right now, we don't have the ability within the software. Well, we have the ability within the software, but we have not set it up and been trained on how to do it within the software so that we could pinpoint those individuals. Because it would be nice to turn to a principal and say, did you know that teacher A spends this consistently and teacher B spends this? Why did they get 3 times more money than teacher B?
What happens there is that the project recorder code tags that expense code to that teacher, whereas there is an option of purchase ordering system, encumbrances, that in your report, because each one, Louise enters in a PO, it says, Glorilla for that purchase, so you can summarize all of her purchases. What's nice about this is this report, you can copy the report in detail and give you better information, and this is more like just a general combination of numbers. The project recorder code will give you much more, to me, better detail and summary of those expenses that they're.
So I'm excited about the potential for this in the future and the direction we're going to be heading. But it all comes back to Mrs. Morgan and her abilities as an accountant to manage the numbers within the office, to understand and work with our software company to construct these detailed expenditures and give us actuals and to see, okay, how is that going to match up with our planning?
Can I ask a maybe totally unrelated question? But we have money budgeted for the individual athletic programs, right? Correct. And then what gets spent on those programs beyond that comes out of the student funds for a good bit of it, right?
Some of that, yeah.
So the student funds are not in here at all. That's its own, so this is what we're talking general fund,
District
taxpayer money right there, yeah, okay. So. And we talked a couple of years ago in this committee about whether we would go away from funding athletics out of the general fund and do it all on fundraising. And we decided we didn't want to go that direction. Other schools do that, a few other schools do that. But
Well, I think
we feel it's really important for us to fund the athletics.
I think it gets back to your core values, and one of the core values in Florence, as long as I've been with each of the boards I've been with for the last 8 years, they understand the inherent value that the extracurricular activities lend to the students' experiences and to the students' growth as a student. So when you talk about the music program, band or choir, when you talk about, cheerleading or talk about athletics,
Or even stuff like yearbook and newspaper.
yearbook, news,
All of that stuff.
all that stuff. It creates an experience that has inherent educational value to the overall growth of our students. Now, not all students will participate in it, but all students are around it when they see the effects of it. You do not have to be a star basketball player on the court to have an experience. I mean, that star basketball player has influences out into the school and sets a grand example for your younger students who look up to them, and for those students who go and participate by watching and being at the events. And so, there's a whole mechanism to what that extracurricular event is doing for your overall health and well-being of your school and its students.
So I guess we seem to be at the point here where we want to, as a group, recommend this proposed budget to the board. Is that what we're feeling like? And then with the caveat of them having a discussion about whether to commit to an SRO or whether to leave those dollars on field trips or supply items or whatever it is we want to take them to, right? That's kind of how we're going to wrap this committee up, I think.
I think so.
Okay.
So then that will come at the
August board meeting, yeah, so the
Before any final
budget,
budget discussion is taking place, we'll have a preliminary budget discussion and allow the public to have comment and to talk to the board about the budgeting process.
so to introduce that item as on the agenda, someone from the committee, whether it's you, Martin, or whether it's, we'll just say, this is what the committee has discussed and studied, and then we can talk about the one big question that we have, which is whether to continue that funding or start that funding up again, and then we go from there. So does that sound like where we're at? Okay. All right, any other questions or comments, or everybody feeling like we can live within our means here? I think so. And for, if we get right on a $5.7 or $1 million budget, and we come down to the end with 2 or 3%, and we, that we haven't quite spent yet, and that seems to me to be pretty darn good planning and budgeting, and it's better than I can do at my house usually.
Well, it's reasonable, and it's within reason for what we discuss.
So, and I think you're talking though about leaving the health care funding at that $275,000, or did you want to bring that one down?
It'll be brought down.
Brought down, okay.
Because it can, historically, it's had more money in it than necessary, so it's contributed to the.
So we're feeling okay with that, even though we're not completely sure what the coming changes are going to be? Okay. So, all right, well, I thank everybody for your study and efforts and time and showing up in the heat. And we can have another round of popsicles if we want.
You want to sign 2 sheets for me?
I can sign for you, absolutely.
Thank you, and I'll grab your popsicles.
So we'll see you tomorrow night.
Oh, that's right.
Next door, right? Is that what we're doing?
Yes.
Library.
Yep, I'll be back, I'll be here.
We're gonna have to stop meeting like this several nights a week here.
6:30?
I think that one's at 7. I think that one's at, oh, wait a minute. It is at 6:30. 6:30, okay, good. I'm glad I looked at that because